All right, well, we have a quorum. So as a preliminary matter, this is Brendan Tedstone, Select Board Chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Catino.
Here.
Mr. Herr.
Here.
Mr. Nasrullah.
Here.
Ms. Lafreniere.
Here.
Mr. Tedstone is here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mr. Kamalu.
Yes.
Ms. Lazarus.
Here.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Some may be here now, some may join us later. Sean McAuliffe.
Yes.
Laura Barry. Not here. Christopher Haymans.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. This open meeting of the Hopkins Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allow public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For the meeting, the Select Board is convening by video conference via Zoom app posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one of its channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of the body are available on the town's website via the Zoom meeting calendar, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first agenda item. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in dialogue with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Not every agenda item will feature public comment. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment as follows. The chair will first ask members of the public who wish to identify their names and addresses only. Once the chair has a list of all public commentators, I will call on each by name and afford up to 3 minutes for any concerns. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So before we begin, let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. Public forum. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? If so, identify yourself by name and address.
Mr. Kilduff.
Buddy? Mr. Kilduff, if you are trying to talk, well, go ahead, Darlene.
Darlene Hayes, 1/3 Road. I had a couple things. One was yesterday, I don't know if you're locked in moving the town meeting up, but yesterday Southborough announced that they were doing their town meeting outdoors and thought that was kind of cool. But the main thing I wanted to bring up is there a way to make it more prominent on our website, how people can get on the homepage, how they can get absentee ballots, how they can vote by mail? I recently had a conversation with Rep. Murray out of who represents Milford, and he told me they normally, for a local election, get 4,000 to 5,000 voters, and that their town clerk was so proactive that he mailed the absentee ballots to every registered voter with very detailed instructions on what to do. 2 weeks ago, they had already received 3,200 applications, and their election's not till June 16th. He said it's been an amazing turnout. It is hard on our homepage to find it. You can find at the town meetings being changed, but you can't find, you have to scroll down into current news, or you have to go to different ways to find out about this ballot. And people I'm talking to just don't know, especially older people, and they're the highest at risk. Is there a way that we can mail out to residents too, and make it more very prominent on the homepage? I mean, we have other things very prominent, but not this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can get with Mr. Kamalo or Mr. Deegan after this and figure that out.
That was it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Kilduff.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for this opportunity. You're all aware that last week the BAA had to make a very difficult decision to cancel their previously postponed 124th Boston Marathon. But in their announcement, they talked about offering the runners that were registered an opportunity to complete this year's marathon by running 26.2 miles, timed officially, somewhere other than the Boston Marathon course. I did some rough calculations. Last year, the 50 numbers or so that the selectmen issued raised $330,000. This year, we have a number of organizations that have been added to the charity or nonprofit list. Rough calculations, including the 26.2 foundation numbers, the Hopkins Athletic Association, the HCA, and the Respite Center, we're looking at over and probably approaching now $1.5 million. The fundraising for those groups at this point was about $1.3 million. So in order to help and support both the BAA and their idea of creating a virtual marathon and providing an opportunity for our charities, I'd like to begin to float the idea of creating a 26.2 mile run within Hopkinton's borders, hopefully on September 14th, or at least within the time frame of September 7th through the 14th, which is the BA's window. The BA's worked pretty hard on this. These charity numbers, the work that they put in is really phenomenal. The fundraising potential back to Hopkinton, because all of that money that's raised in some way benefits organizations in Hopkinton. And while I don't expect this to be a Hopkinton government-driven idea, it's going to take some support. There are several people that are, I noticed, that are tuned in right now. John McCauley, Chief Slayman, and Chief Bennett, to name three. We're not looking to add burdens to their workloads, but we will have to do some consulting. So I believe that the idea is a win across the board. It supports what the BAA is going to do, and it provides an opportunity for our Hopkinton's charity runners to fulfill the commitment and complete the 124th Boston Marathon. And the bottom line, Mr. Chairman, is a healthy nod with a smile on your faces would be the kind of encouragement we need to begin now to reach out and put together a plan and a structure to pull this off in a safe manner.
So, Mr. Kilduff, thank you for your time. That was a nice presentation. I am not allowed to comment one way or the other at public comment. I would implore you to get with Mr. Kamalo and get on our next agenda and see if you or we can get this done. I cannot say if I'm for or against this, but I wish you the best of luck, and I would implore you to get to Mr. Kamalo and go from there.
Well, I can see your collective smile, so that's encouragement enough.
Smiles because we're living in the best town in the country. How's that?
Agreed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kilduff.
Thank you.
Mr. Kamalo, Mr. Kilduff will follow up with you and we'll try to get him on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none? Okay, moving on. Thank you. So COVID-19 update. Sean McAuliffe, Public Health Director, you'll provide us an update on the town's response to the COVID-19. Sean, understand that we are probably already 35, 40 minutes late. So if you can give us the 30,000 foot overview of what's going on, I'd appreciate it.
I'll give the 3-minute version.
You're on the clock.
All right. So we continue to do well. We've got 119 cases. 8 of those are active, 98 recovered, and 13 deaths. We have no active cases at Golden Pond and Fairview. Of the 8 active cases, the illnesses are related to contact with a known COVID person at work or a social event. And within those cases, there's been some, in-home spread. So it's still out there. We need people to remain diligent, focused on hygiene, social distancing, face covering. I'll cut that out. So as we move into this reopening process, we just have to maintain personal responsibility, protecting ourselves, our family, our neighbors, and the community at large. As I was drafting my notes for today, there were 4 kids without social distancing, no face coverings out behind the fire department. There's been anywhere from those 4 to 15 each day that I've been here. You see evidence, or this weekend I went out to take a call from a resident. I got a sunburn because I was out there for 3 hours after that. So what we're seeing is people are, going to restaurants, going to essential retail establishments without face coverings. They're kind of relaxing their efforts. We need to, refocus and make sure that, we're all committed to keeping Hopkinton healthy. John often bugs me that he wants to know where Hopkinton excels. Our collective management and performance is one of those metrics. We were just recently asked to start uploading all of our policies and procedures that we have rolled out in town as an example for those communities that are struggling to follow and utilize. So this is an opportunity for us, if we own it and if we continue this, with our success, that we will be and continue to be recognized as one of the top performing communities in the Commonwealth. So I'm just asking everybody for their cooperation and to, accept that responsibility. And as I said, I'm convinced if we continue to do what we've done, we'll continue to see, a healthy Hopkinton. That said, what are we doing now? We're in the process of assisting everybody with the reopening process. That is, that's a daunting process. The reopening team at the firehouse has developed an umbrella plan that works within the goals and objectives and schedule of the town manager. Within that structure, we've had each individual department leader produce a department-specific plan that addresses the physical and operational constraints in the department. We're in the process of reviewing and starting the implementation of those plans. So as we get the process going, as we get people returned to town hall, we will work out, individual issues that we've identified, and with the hope that we can open to the public sooner than later. As I said, we've got proven practices that have been implemented by the fire department, police department, and DPW. Those proven practices will be rolled out and scaled throughout the municipal departments, and we'll be using those practices and encouraging, businesses in Hopkinton to adopt an employee kind of based system that's developed off of those. I think our biggest challenge moving forward is, with the reopening plans that have been developed for, all of the businesses, the offices, but now especially the camps, the school programs, Parks and Rec, and the schools, is a requirement to provide daily screening, monitoring, and record keeping. So before each day, every employee, program participant, and student will be required to submit a daily attestation that they have no temperature, they have no symptoms, they have no exposures. We have to record all of that data, we have to manage the data, and then we have to hold on to that data throughout the duration of the event. We're working right now with town leadership, with IT, to figure out solutions on whether we can scale what we have in place. But this is all a work in process. The health department is working specifically at this moment with Parks and Rec to figure out how we can get them to a sense, as near of a sense of normal, and just get them open and operating so that they can help take some of the burden off the residents of Hopkinton, and provide, the children a safe kind of daycare or camp experience. I'm working with Connor to do what I can to help roll out the, a safe and uneventful election. And other than that, I'll just end with that we are working, with all of the phase one groups, and now helping the phase two groups prepare for their current openings or their June openings. Understanding that, these rules, the orders, the guidelines, things change every day. I've had guidelines change within the meeting that I'm at. So, we're trying to facilitate as easy and as comprehensive and understandable and forgiving a reopening as we can. I think we've done a decent job, but it's going to be one of our biggest challenges moving forward. I think I can stop there, and then if you have any questions.
Okay. Let's see. Any members of the board have a question? Mr. Catino? No. Mr. Herr?
Dawn, did the governor's phase one allow for playing fields to open?
The fields themselves can open, and then it's up to, so they can open to you going and running, like doing sprints on the field. They're not open to organized sports, be it youth or adult. They're not open to group activities. The school fields are open at the discretion of the school. Parks and Rec fields have been opened. And right now we're working on, evaluating what fields and other municipally owned resources can open safely and operate safely so that we can accommodate, our camps and programs.
I think there's a mixed message out there because the kids are saying the fields are supposed to be open, and then the kids are going over there with a couple of friends and they're running sprints, and the police are coming by and throwing them off the field. So I think as a town, we got to get our head around this a little bit more. You can't keep the kids locked up forever. If they're 10 yards apart and they're running down the field, I personally don't see an issue with it. So just something we got to start thinking about. We got to get kids moving.
Right. I agree.
All right. Mr. Nasrullah, anything?
I'm good. I said keep up the good work, Sean.
Ms. Lafreniere?
No, I've been keeping up with stuff, so.
Good. And I have nothing. So, Mr. McAuliffe, thank you very much. I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda items are to approve the minutes of the 5/19/20 Select Board meeting, accept the resignation of Margaret Shar from the Board of Appeals. Any members like to break out any item for a separate vote? Hearing none. I will request a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Well, I need a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is it seconded?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Catino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Herr? Mr. Nasrullah?
Yes, really, yes.
We're voting on the consent agenda.
Yeah, I'm a yes.
Okay. Mr. Nasrullah?
Yes.
Ms. Lafreniere?
Yes,
Ted Stone, yes. Thank you very much. And thank you to Margaret Peggy Shaw for her time on the Board of Appeals. I'm sure we'll get a letter of appreciation out to her, correct, Mr. Kamalu?
Right.
Yes. All right, Hopkins Public Library Foundation donation. The board will consider accepting a donation of $119,438. The third and final donation towards the cost of the public library renovation and addition project from Laura Barry on behalf of the Hopkins Public Library Foundation. The donation will be applied to the FY21 library project debt service. Ms. Barry.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Ms. Barry. How are
Yes.
you? Yes, loud and clear.
Good. Good to see you all. Thank you all for all of your hard work that you've been doing throughout these strange times that we're in and working remotely. You seem to be running extremely efficiently, and it's very impressive to see and to participate. I'm here tonight with some good news, just to notify you that a donation was sent to the town, and I believe received a week or two ago, in the amount of $119,000 and some change. This, as you said, is the third and final payment of the $1 million contribution raised over the course of the last 8 or so years from Hopkins Public Library Foundation, and is for the library renovation project. With this $1 million, along with the $4.5 million grant that came from the state, the total cost of the library to the town is just $6.2 million. So a great project, a great team effort by everyone who has been involved with that for many years at this point. And I'm just happy to be able to, that we're able to fulfill our commitment, and pleased to be here tonight to share that with you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Laura. Any board members have anything? Mr. Catino?
Yeah, I just think, what a great investment. It absolutely is our crown jewel in the downtown. Thank you for keeping it up. It's just fabulous. And now it's money's coming in. It's just great. It really is.
Thank you. Mr. Herr?
I think it's great. Thank you, Laura. Thanks to the entire team there at the library. When an organization commits and makes good on that commitment to build something in Hopkinton, we all come together to make it happen. It's all of us working together, and it's really nice to see this come to fruition, and glad we can apply it to that debt service for next year. That helps a lot. Thank you.
So bear with me for a second. It's starting to rain pretty good, so I'm going inside. Mr. Nasrullah.
Oh, my cushions.
Just want to say thank you, Laura. I think you've done a fabulous job.
With the cushions.
The library turned out beautiful. So happy with it. And to see that money coming in is just icing on the cake. I think fabulous job, and thank you. Thank you for all your hard work.
Great. You're of course extremely welcome. I should also add that with the library opening now almost 3 years ago, the Library Foundation did alter its mission slightly. It was originally tasked with just the education and support of the renovation. We are now missioned with and shifted to the mission for supporting the library in general, in particular, long-term or larger improvements. So we did have an excess of the $1 million, which we are still looking to support the library projects. And I work with the library director. Our board meets with her in order to meet any needs that will or should come up. We have continued fundraising, although unfortunately we did have to cancel our large fundraiser plan for this year because it was going to be a large gathering outdoor event with families. But we have also relied very heavily, just to circle back to Mr. Kilduff, on those charitable bibs. About $100,000 of what we raised since 2012 has come from marathon bibs. Our runners have been very motivated, have always, I think, out of the dozens of bibs that we have received, only one, and that was in the first year, has not exceeded the minimum. We've always done very well and supported our runners. Unfortunately, this past year, we only got one bib. I would like to actually just respectfully request next year if there is any possibility that we could go back to the prior method, and that one bib was supplied to the Library Foundation, another bib was supplied to the library, and that was assigned to us, and we have done quite well under that system for many years. This year, I would like to report our runner has now exceeded $13,000. So one person has raised $13,000 for the library so far this year. Also, and just to pivot a little bit, we did note, and I have to mention Brian Herr. I did reach out to Brian Herr a month or two ago about the possibility of a sort of a unique situation, and that is that the Library Foundation did purchase a 3D printer for the library. It is for the use of the library, but with the library being closed, it was put into use making personal protective gear for the town. And a volunteer has been running that, and in the first month or so made 25 pieces of gear. The Library Foundation paid for all of the equipment and is paying for all of the filament, all the supplies. And like I said, in the first month, we're now in about 2 months, he contributed about 25 pieces. So we're very happy to help out the town in any way we can, and obviously continue to do whatever we can to help out in any way we can.
I just wanted to mention that the town is using the library quite frequently. I've been there for many meetings, and I love the meeting rooms. There's small ones, and then there's that larger one, and we've had a number of things for the children in the schools, and it's just been a wonderful facility for the townspeople to use. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mary Jo. And I don't think there's anything I can add that the board hasn't already, Laura. So from speaking as a representative of the town, I thank you very, very much for all the hard work and dedication that you put into the library. And obviously the $119,000 goes a long way too. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept a donation of $119,438 from the Hopkins Public Library Foundation.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Catino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Herr? He hasn't figured out the mute button, I guess. Mr. Nasrullah?
Yes.
Ms. Lafreniere?
Yes.
Mr. Tedstone, yes.
Hurry
Mr.
up.
Herr, are you back with us?
Yes.
Attaboy. All right, so thank you again, Laura. That's very, very, very nice of you.
You're welcome, and thank you all for your service and for your hard work.
Thanks. Moving on to the quarterly deposit and investment report, we will receive an update from Chris Haymans, Town Treasurer Collector, on the quarterly deposit and investment report for the period ending March 31, 2020. Mr. Haymans.
Good evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So I am here tonight virtually to provide an update on the town's third quarter finances while providing the deposit and investment report, an updated version of which you should have received today.
Yep. Thank you.
Great. So as we all know, the COVID-19 health crisis has had a significant impact on the economy. I am glad to report, however, that the town remains on solid financial ground. As of March 31st, the town's deposits and investments totaled $56.6 million, with $43.3 million held in the general fund. The remaining balance consists of the trust funds, performance bonds, student activity, and the parks and recreation funds. Regarding the town's investments, while they have certainly experienced negative effects from the virus, our conservative investment approach has shielded the town from dramatic financial impact. During this quarter, the very conservatively invested trust funds investments saw a return of negative 4.9%, and the stabilizations funds investment return was negative 5.5%. The other post-employee benefits fund, which is more moderately invested because of the long-term nature of the fund, was down by 13.84%. Now, at the same time, the S&P 500, which serves as a benchmark for the economy's overall performance, experienced a loss of 20%. So comparing these returns, we can see that the town's investments performed quite favorably in relation to the economy as a whole. As we continue to deal with COVID-19, the stabilization funds will likely need to be drawn upon to support the town's expenses and operations. In order to further safeguard these funds during a time in which we most need them, they are being segregated into a separate account with an even more conservative risk profile.
Are we sure?
In the coming months, the finance team will closely monitor the town's cash flow and investments, as well as any possible budgetary gaps that need to be addressed. I would also like to remind everyone that pending a full opening of Town Hall, the Treasurer's Office remains open and available to residents through email, voicemail, and a new live chat option on our website. And that is all I have. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Catino? Nope. Mr. Herr? Nope. Mr. Nasrullah?
None.
Okay. Mary Jo?
No, I was studying it, and
None for me either. Thank you.
unfortunately, from the time Corona started, I could see some deficits emerging and coming forward. And we just need to stay on top of it. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So I have no questions either. If you hear background noise, my daughter's making cookies, so sorry for that mixer. Hopefully she's done cooking. Thank you, Chris. Moving on to the FY20 CARES Act, FY21 budget and annual town meeting updates and annual town election warrant. Mr. Kamalo, could you provide an update on the FY20 and 21 budgets and the CARES Act funding, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My update tonight is going to be very brief. First, I would like to thank the school committee for hosting Select Board Chair Ted Stone, Vice Chair Cotino, CFO Tim O'Leary, and myself at its last meeting last week. We had a very frank and productive discussion about the fiscal year 2021 budget, similar to the discussions the Select Board has held over the past months. Because of the town's plan to hold the annual town meeting in September, in the hope that most of the town's registered voters will be able to participate safely, Tim O'Leary, Ben Sweeney, and I are working with department heads to develop the 1/12 budgets for July, August, and September. Those are the first 3 months of FY21. At the next Select Board meeting on June 16th, I will be presenting you with proposed budget levels for those 3 months within the spending levels covered in our recent discussions and in the format prescribed by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. Approval of the 1/12 budgets at the June 16th meeting will be important to meet the state timelines so that the town can continue its operations on and after July 1st. As an additional matter tonight, I would like to report that to date, the town has incurred approximately $21,800 in expenses that we believe will be reimbursable from FEMA on a 75% federal cost share, including expenses for personal protective equipment, public health equipment, cleaning supplies, and public safety overtime specifically related to the COVID-19 response. The town has also incurred approximately $48,000 in expenses that are reimbursable from the Commonwealth under the Federal CARES Act. These expenses include the 25% local cost share for FEMA authorized expenses and full funding for information technology expenses for the schools and other town departments to cope with COVID-19. Therefore, I request that you specifically authorize me to submit reimbursements for CARES Act reimbursement from the Commonwealth as is allowed under Section 3-1B of the Town Charter. With that authorization, I'll be submitting an initial request to FEMA for the reimbursement of authorized COVID-19 costs in the amount of $21,800, and an initial request to the Commonwealth for reimbursement of CARES Act expenses in the amount of $48,450, leaving $1.55 million of our $1.6 million allocation available for FY21. And also, in terms of the special, in terms of the annual town meeting, I'm used to having the special town meetings later in the year. I will be asking for a motion from the board to set the annual town meeting date. Based on consultations, I believe, with the town clerk as well as the moderator, September 21 appears to be the preferred date. We also, based on prior conversations of the board, I'm also going to ask you to approve a motion to sign the town election warrant for June 29th, 2020. So there are three motions in regard to the town managers in regards to the FY20 and 21 budgets, as well as the annual town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kamalu. Are we, just because I'm a little hesitant on how all the COVID stuff is folding out, unfolding, sorry. Are we obliged to set the annual town meeting date today, or can we put this off to see if anything develops until our next meeting? I know that we're like a 45-day or 60-day. I'm not sure exactly what the time frame is, but if we're not absolutely legally obliged to set the date today for that September 21 meeting, I would be inclined to kind of put that off and set it when things become a little bit more concrete with how this COVID virus is going.
Yeah, I believe the board can wait until the 16th of June.
Are you okay with that?
Elaine, subject to your endorsement, I'm okay with that.
You're muted, Elaine.
You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. That's fine with me. Yes.
Okay. So I guess before I accept a motion, why don't I go around the room and see if anyone has anything to say? Who's first? Mr. Coutinho.
Yeah, Mr. Kamala, I just want to make sure that when we're doing these 1 month budgets and doing our initial request for the CARES Act, that we are absolutely protecting our schools and protecting our public safety. You know, that those are our two key things in the town, and just make sure that whatever we do, that's 1 and 2, and everything else falls underneath that. So that's my only comment on that, and the town meeting date and the election warrant date. We can work on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Herr. Oh, actually, before Mr. Herr, Mr. Kamal, any comments on Coutinho stuff?
His point is well taken.
Thank you. Mr. Herr?
No questions at this time.
Good. Mr. Nasrullah?
Yeah, quick one. So at during the public comment section, we heard about Southborough doing the outdoors town meeting. Is that something that's on the table? Is that something we can do?
When we initially discussed postponing the town meeting, the annual town meeting to September, internally we did look at all the options, including holding the annual town meeting outdoors. We identified many challenges in that regard, especially the requirement that the social distancing. If, for example, you have a controversial article that comes up, discussing it in an open field may be very, very difficult. The consensus was that we'd rather wait, see how this unfolds, buy ourselves time, and shoot for an annual town meeting in September, where all eligible voters of the town are able to participate.
But I mean, I think,
So,
I'm sorry. That's on.
I think the social distancing thing is going to be in existence until there's a vaccine. So, I mean, even in September, we're still going to have to socially distance. If we do it indoors, it seems.
If I may, through the chair, Mr. Nasrullah, you have to remember the reason why we're not having Hopkins Day is because of Triple E at night, and we still can't go out, but for another 2 years, I believe.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be able to have it outdoors anyway.
And as far as social distancing goes, that 6 foot radius is more safe on an interior building. Exteriorly, if there's a higher wind, if you get a wind that's blowing, towards people, then that 6 foot barrier just all of a sudden, to be safe becomes 30 feet sometimes. So that 6 foot social distancing works inside.
I've heard it both ways. I've heard that,
Yeah.
it's less likely, and now you're saying the opposite. So is Ms. McAuliffe still on here? I guess not.
So I don't know. I think so. The semantics of it will have to be worked out. I don't know if we're going to work the semantics of it right now. I don't know if this is the time that we would work the semantics. I would think that Norman and Sean and Connor and whatever players are in would just work.
I agree. I mean, I guess that, they're the ones that should be working it out. But I think that it's something that we should be taking a look at. If it's safer to do it outside, then I think that's something we should keep in mind. And maybe move it earlier on a Saturday where we can avoid the Triple E issue.
And I also think that, with the middle school and high school, we should be able to in September utilize both of those buildings. And it's not like we get 20,000 people to our town meetings like some of these other towns. We get sometimes 300 or 400 people, and if we blocked out some seats in the middle school auditorium and the high school gym, and I remember with the Legacy Farms vote, we didn't have social distancing, but we had a massive turnout, and there was the gym, high school gym, middle school auditorium, middle school gym could be used, the some of the lecture rooms, and if we needed to go over to Hopkins, we could do that too, or the marathon gym, or I think that we could definitely provide adequate social distancing in the schools. But again, I don't think we're going to be able to make that determination today.
Oh, yeah, I get you.
But your point is well taken, Mr. Nasrullah.
Thank you.
Okay.
My only comment is that I really don't want to see it go any later in September. I really hate the thoughts of it going into October, November. If we do have a spike in the fall, which they're talking about, we could be in more trouble. I think to stay as close to the warm weather as possible is the smart thing to do. So I would prefer it even earlier in September. I don't know how anybody else feels about it. I think it would probably be difficult to do. So, I mean, I would go with the 21st, but I don't really want to see it going into October and November.
Well, maybe we'll have a vaccine by then. I saw a pretty cool post on one of my Facebook friends that's actually, I see is at this meeting tonight, that has a friend that is working on a vaccine, and she's doing some pretty phenomenal things. So maybe we'll have a vaccine by then. Who knows? But probably not. But thank you. So I will now seek Mr. Kamala. What are we looking for motions?
We have 3 of them.
Yeah.
2 of them.
Yeah.
2 of them, right?
Oh, 2 of them.
It's down to 2 now.
Okay.
Putting the vote on the annual town meeting.
Okay.
So
Mr. Chair, the town clerk has a question.
Mr. Deegan, as you were.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two things really briefly, one briefer than the other, just to answer some of the questions about when in September. When we sat down with the moderator and discussed it, it was first brought up, that the first week of September we have the state primary, and then the week after we have Rosh Hashanah, and the week after was supposed to be the start of the Boston Marathon, and so that's changed since we had that meeting. So it's possible to potentially move it up a week earlier, but we have to look and make sure that there's no other conflicts.
Okay.
And the other point I wanted to make is in regards to the election warrant. So we're trying to get as many of the folks we can to get absentee mail-in, and so far, just as of today, we're just under 30% of the same turnout that we had in busier local elections over the past few years have already requested. We're looking for ways that we can try to increase that number. And but one thing that we're looking at through conversations with the emergency management group, as well as specifically with the fire department and the health department, we're looking at potential risks with the current setup of the election as it is. And one of those pieces is something that I've kind of mentioned a few times a little bit before, which is the actual hours of operation of the polls. We've identified two major liability risks involved with having the polls open for the normal 14 hours. One is a risk that comes with hosting the election in that time is the heat risk of late June, along with the COVID risk, poses a higher risk to our trained election staff who are primarily over the age of 65. So we were looking at this and saying that we didn't really have the staff. If anyone called out or said they weren't going to be able to work, we're already going to be likely understaffed and requesting waivers as is. But the fire department expressed concern with anyone working the full 14-hour days in that kind of heat, and with the level of social distancing we'll have to maintain, especially between the election workers, and still processing all of the mail-in ballots. We're looking at an ideal time being still having an 8-hour day with a noon to 8 as an ideal. Noon is the latest you can start it anyway. And then the other issues that really the only issue that comes from that is people who would normally come in the morning would then still have the option to come later if they could. Having the closing hours later in the day would be a larger benefit than trying to do it early, even though we looked at there was a lower heat risk if we tried to do it earlier and just close it in the afternoon. But I was concerned about the potential of not getting ballots by mail-in by the time that the polls closed if it's a little bit earlier, as well as people who are looking to get in at the last minute, as opposed to the later option, which offers a solution to that. And obviously, of course, we could still continue with the normal 7 to 8, but we're going to have to potentially also spend a lot more money for a low turnout election, which we've seen in a lot of other towns as well at this point. As we're going to, under some of the suggestions, we would need to have some sort of portable climate control that we could put into the gymnasium for the time frame, which, just due to some of these reasons and a few others that I don't want to waste your time with, I'm going to recommend going for 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. for the polls. I can answer any questions if anyone has any or has any concerns.
Okay, thanks, Connor.
Mr. Chair, I'm kind of back with some of the things Connor's talking about. I'm back to the original question we had a month ago: is why do we have to have this election 2 weeks after school closes, when half the town leaves in the heat of the summer, and with a lot of concern about keeping our poll workers safe. I don't see a great rush. I mean, if town meeting's going to September or October, well, not October. Why, I don't get the rush here, but.
Currently, the emergency law does not allow for us to move it beyond the June 30th date. So at the moment, we're stuck with it pending the legislature deciding to add a new solution or us putting in special legislation. But just based on the timelines, they said, this is essentially the solution that was offered. It's been working for other towns, and they might potentially look at that as, we can make it work for this one election. So that's one of the risks with them potentially not going for it.
So are you aware of any legislation that's pending right now, Connor, with the legislature to extend these election dates?
No, a lot of the election-related legislation right now is to try and expand the ability and efficiency of mail-in voting for any future elections, including for the primaries and November. That's really the current election priority right now at the state level.
I would be okay with changing the hours a little bit and doing a 7 a.m. When do we normally start? 7 a.m., right? 7 to 8?
Yep.
So like 7 a.m. to 11, and then shut it down and get everybody out of there from 11 to 2, and then maybe come back for the after work hours. But to take people's before work hours out or after work hours out, that's when most of the voting gets done. I don't think that would be fair.
And I agree. That's why what I was recommending was just the end of the day. I don't know if it's possible at this point to do the split day, but I do know it's possible to have the hours in the end of the day that would allow for if someone did come early and found that it wasn't open, but we had signage up to say that the polls are going to be open at X time until Y time, then they would still have an opportunity to come back.
Connor, through the chair, Connor, is there anything stopping us from just mailing out mail-in ballots to everyone in town? Voters?
Simply resources. That's pretty much the only piece is, realistically, we should be able to, we can't send out just the ballots. We can only send out the applications based on the current law. So there's that piece as well. There is discussion for the primary to potentially include sending ballots directly. I'm a stronger advocate for sending the applications to ensure that the voter is actually still living where you're potentially sending a ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we'd see issues of just trying to send ballots to folks, but I've been looking into ways to get more widespread mailing of applications, and so far we've had a lot of takers. We have probably roughly 600 applications as of today, and we're only in the first week of June, and we'll see more and more start coming in. And I'm probably going to look into doing a mailing to some of the more vulnerable population to see if we can get seniors to jump in on doing the mail-in ballots.
I mean, it seems that's the safest way to go. As far as election workers, as far as everyone, if we can just do mail-in ballots, that seems, the way to go. Also, as far as the application, when I filled mine out, it seemed like that could be done online very simply, where you just check off a few boxes and say, yes, I want a mail-in ballot. Is that something that we can look at, where we can just get the application process, at least an online thing where you can mail them out?
So thank you for that question. That's actually quite relevant. So right now, that is not legally allowed because the current law requires they need to fill out an application, sign it, and they can still transmit that electronically if they would like. But one of the requests that the Mass Town Clerks Association is making in some potential changes to the mail-in ballot laws that are being done is to allow for an online application process to make it easier for someone to be able to request a ballot. Because like you said, it's really such a simple process of the information you need to put in. And it really can be made much simpler in order to make that request. I know they're also looking at potentially mailing out from the secretary's office, therefore saving us money and time on it to mail out and transmit then to us the application requests. So from the secretary's office, which would be able to ensure that every registered voter can get an application, and then they can choose if they want to just give it to me, and we can then just process it quickly and get them a ballot.
Through the chair, I'm sorry, you're still talking.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. I know that drive up is banned in Hopkinton for most applications, but can we do drive up voting?
So the issue there comes in the designated hall where people are allowed to vote, and then designating where the guardrail is. And you lose the control to make it so that someone cannot remove a ballot from the polling location if it goes to their car. So there's a few liability risks involved with giving people ballots in their cars, as well as they still need to go to a check-in table if they're voting in person. And mail-in voting ends the Friday before the election itself.
Okay.
I've already seen a few instances, I won't name names, of clerks who have not necessarily done this properly. And it's resulted in putting the town in a legal situation at this point and not having the Secretary of State ready to back them on it. I think our best bet is to continue as a town, as a community, to encourage mail-in voting during this crisis so that we can avoid having one of our treasured parts of our town, our local elections, where we always have people running for offices and looking to support their community, as some potential spot where we had a resurgence of the virus in Hopkinton.
And to just mail out or do mail-in ballots, is there any kind of special legislation that's required for us to just send them out, or is it just purely funding?
It's funding and human resources aspect, and just that currently the amount of actual time it takes to process the ballots or the applications themselves has been quite time consuming with our normal tasks. But we've been trying to set aside time. We've been working later, earlier if we need to try to see if we can make sure that those are done along with everything else that we have to keep up with as well. But right now, one example is we have money remaining or opened up even in the election budget to easily do a wider mailing and some sort of mail merge document that we can try to get that info out to people who haven't already signed up for absentee or early, and try to get that to them quickly.
Connor, can you explain to me if I request a mail-in ballot and the mail-in ballot doesn't reach me or misplace it or whatever, and I decided to go up rather than send in the mail-in ballot, I go into to vote personally. How does that work? Because once you send the ballot out, it should.
That's a great question. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Connor.
Did you?
Just to answer that question, if any of you request an
Yeah, I think you're.
Yeah, something's wrong with it. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Me to answer it.
Hold on, Mary Jo.
You
Connor,
can't
you
hear
back?
him.
So, sorry, it looks like my internet got a little wonky.
Go ahead, Connor. You're on.
It's still frozen.
I think it's still wonky.
Okay, there we go. So Yeah, essentially, if you were to request a ballot, it was mailed to you. Let's say it just completely slipped your mind, or you tried to mail it and you checked and saw that the post office made a mistake or something, or again, it just didn't arrive to your house or something. If that's the case, then you're still able to go in and vote. There's no additional hassle with it. It's just you go in and vote. If your ballot has been received, it is for an early ballot, it's considered voted and processed, and it's just going to go into the machine. At that point, you would not be able to come in and change your vote. With an absentee ballot, you would be able to come in and say, whatever qualification kept me from coming before, I'm here now. I would like to vote in person. If your ballot has not yet been put through the machine, then you can still vote. So there's safeguards in place to ensure that if someone realizes that they're not going to be able to get their ballot in time, then they will still be able to make sure that they come in to vote. And they can get their ballot in even by handing me their voted ballot in their envelope at the polls on election day before the polls close. They give it to an election official, then it can go marked in as received and processed with all the other ballots.
And to answer a lot of the naysayers' questions, there's no way that somebody could go in there and vote and then hand another election official their absentee or their mail-in vote and have it count twice, correct?
No.
That is absolutely correct. It would be impossible to pull that off, because if someone tried to, for instance, one of you cast an absentee ballot and it was already put through the machine, or you had voted early, if someone walks in and says, "Oh, I'm this person, I need to vote," then when they go over to the check-in, like everyone else does, it's going to be, "Nope, your name's already checked off. You've already voted." Even if they say, "Well, I didn't vote," it's like, "Well, according to this, we have a envelope with your signature on it. Unless you have some reason that you have evidence to challenge it, then you've already voted."
Is that a crime by doing that, Connor?
What, to try and vote when you're not the person?
Either that or to try to vote more than once, or as they used to say,
Yes.
vote often?
Both of those would be a felony. And we take that very seriously when we're at the polls. And it helps that we have so many community members that are working as election workers that know so many of the faces and know when they see their neighbors and can tell when they see someone who clearly doesn't belong. And we have had situations before we've basically told someone off who came in and blatantly asked if he could vote for a family member. And we had to have him removed from the polls.
So one of the concerns I have about all this is confusion can be a form of voter suppression. And I just don't hear a very clear, concise plan or message about how we're going to communicate to the residents of Hopkinton the simple, easiest way to vote. There's lots of different options and angles. We're still talking about the hours. I mean, this thing's 4 weeks away. We got to get this figured out. We got to get it figured out quick if we're still going June 29th, or we're suppressing voters, and that's not fair to people.
And that's a great point as well. I mean, we do need to make sure that the information is key. Voters having this information is important, and it'll be one of the things that actually we have been already looking into. We were trying to make sure that we had all of the information to include is to send out a postcard to all registered voters, basically with information regarding what the hours are going to be, what the options for potentially doing mail-in will be, and when mail-in ballots are due. So right now we're trying to look at best ways to get that information out there, because that will be important. Unfortunately, what part of the nature of the beast right now is that mail-in voting is both early by mail and absentee, which is inherently confusing. And people ask me all the time, which is which one am I supposed to do? And really, because they removed they added the COVID-19 excuses onto absentee, it's not the same as before where you'd have to have special circumstances to qualify. So it can be more confusing. And so it's, it's up to us continuing to put out information every way we can to reach every part of the public to make sure that people know what they need to do.
Mr. Kamal, can you check with Ray Mieres tomorrow and his team to see if there's any legislation pending for these elections this year at the municipal level in Massachusetts? I do not think we're ready for prime time here at all. I mean, this is just not how we should be running an election 4 weeks out for all this confusion. I'm not blaming anybody. It is what it is. It's nobody's fault. It's just a lot of moving parts here. And if there's legislation pending and something's going to happen, we should know about it. If there's none pending, then we got to keep going, obviously. But I'd like to know if there's any legislation pending. Because if there is, I'd want to keep a close eye on that.
I think we could also ask Ray. We could also talk to Carolyn about that, Carolyn Dykema. So I don't know if my point was made or if I was talking at the same time, Mr. Hurd. Connor, did you hear my question about the felony?
Yes, I did, and I had said I don't know if I didn't say it clearly. But yes, I think it was just the question of, is that a felony? Which, yes, either one of those options is a felony, unless there was a follow-up question.
No, the follow-up question was, I would assume at that point, if somebody was to attempt to put a duplicate ballot in, that they would be arrested on the spot, correct?
That is accurate, yes.
A felony is not a misdemeanor, that it's not something that you send a summons to. It's someone that they're arrested on the spot. So
that is correct.
So if anybody has that idea that they're going to vote often, as they used in the old days, that we know that there's zero tolerance to that, and that person will be arrested on the spot, correct?
That is correct. That's why we have a police detail there in the building at all times to
Excellent.
make sure that those election laws are enforced.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So should we get back to the hours that we need to think about for this election if it's going to happen on June 29th?
I think so, yeah.
Before we go there, through the chair, before we go there, I just want to ask Connor one more thing. If we have applied for mail-in ballots, when should we expect to receive it?
Likely within the next week.
Next week? Okay.
Yeah, it should be on its way. The absentee ballot should be on their way from the printer now. They are a little backed up, it seems, with a lot of their other orders, but we had the proofs all come in, everything looked good, so we should have electronic copies of the specimens soon, probably this week, and then we should have I put up an ASAP order on the shipping, so they'll do next day shipping once it's printed.
And when's the cutoff date for these mail-in requests, Connor?
People can request a mailed ballot under the current law all the way up until noon the weekday before the election. It is recommended, because it needs to go through the post, that you actually do it as soon as possible. However, if for some reason that you do it and it's last minute or anything, you're not sure that the post office will get it in time if you mail it back to us, then you can still physically drop off your voted ballot in a locked box that will be at Town Hall. So there are other options in play, and the ballots themselves, both absentee and early, any mail-in ballot can be delivered as late and received as late as before the polls close on election day. Another reason why I was mentioning the idea of making sure that we stay open on the later side rather than opening early and staying open kind of mid.
And is there a difference, Connor, between early and absentee as far as I think absentee ballot would be someone that is not physically able to get to the polls, whether it be somebody in a rehab, somebody on a planned trip, et cetera, versus early. So
that is correct.
So if I were to make a mistake and request an absentee ballot and an absentee ballot sent to me, and I fill it out, is that a valid ballot?
So fortunately, the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office did rule that under their regulations on what excuses are allowed for having an absentee, including absence from the town on the day of the election, physical disability, and religious belief, Under physical disability, they have also put under the auspices of that higher risk of infection from COVID-19, precaution from catching COVID-19, or pre-existing conditions that could increase your risk for COVID-19 exposure. So because of that, all those auspices in this time, I mean, we're not going to ask someone, if someone decides they wanted to vote absentee specifically and not early, then it would pretty much just be that if they decide that they want to get elections for the whole year, which that's another option, is it will allow for especially voters who are in more of that high risk demographic to be able to request their ballots for the rest of the calendar year so that they can kind of allow this to breeze over. And that'll be helpful for a lot of folks who are very concerned due to health conditions that put them at higher risk for severe problems with COVID-19 infection.
Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Kamala, where are we at?
So we are still looking for a motion to approve and sign the election warrant.
That warrant has specified hours on it, correct?
I'll check quickly. It normally does. It normally has the hours and the location.
I'm having a real hard time changing the hours, Connor. I mean, there's enough confusion in this process. Again, no one's fault, just because of where we are in the world. And we're only going to add to that if we start changing the hours at the polls.
Mr. Hare, through the chair, the warrant does not have the hours.
Makes me move down and we figure this hours thing out, but
I think Mr. Hur is right on point here. We need to know what the hours are. I think before we vote on the warrant.
So, if I may, you could include in your vote what the hours will be. It's up to the select board to decide what those hours are. I'm just taking the recommendations of myself as well as the emergency management group to you so that I can give you the tools you need to make whatever decision you deem necessary.
Through the chair, Mr. Connor, I believe also because of the legislative schedule for the board to act on the warrant, today may be our last opportunity to do so.
So my only concern is with the hours and reducing. There's already a lot of confusion. I believe that everybody should have the opportunity to vote, and it should be done simply. And I think reducing the hours is, in my mind, is troublesome. I think even having the staggered hours, while it makes sense, I'm not sure that somebody would come by will understand that we have a start and stop and restart and voting. People may show up and say, "Oh, it's closed. I guess I missed." I have a hard time saying that we should shorten the hours or change the hours at all. Am I on mute? No response from anyone?
No, I heard you, Irfan. We heard you.
All right.
If I may, Connor, it appears you have made a very strong case based on the advice from the emergency management group. However, the board is taking the position that this may not be the time to do so. Therefore, my recommendation is that the board vote the warrant as presented.
I'm sorry, Norman, can you repeat that?
My recommendation is that the board move forward and vote and approve the warrant as presented.
With no hours on it?
Yeah, no hours.
So we're going to approve something with no hours.
You're not required to be on the warrant.
So
But have they been on the warrant?
I can check quickly. I don't believe so. I can check quickly.
Last year? Can anyone pull that up?
I actually can right now.
I just think we need to be consistent. I mean, we're already messing this thing up. You know, moving the date and having it months apart from town meeting, which is, you know, there's such a rhythm to this thing over the, you know, hundreds of years that, or the 50 years we've all been involved. To break that rhythm and then further break it by these funky hours, I think would be really disruptive. And on the other side of this, there could be all kinds of contested
Do that. Yes. Oh.
issues, and people could call for recounts. It just sounds like a really messy situation.
Just want to echo Mr. Hur's statement, consistency. I think consistency matters here. It's messy, ugly, and Mr. Deegan, I know that you've done a lot of work on this, and you want to protect the workers, but I think I think we need a stronger presence for mail-in, to hopefully reduce the exposure to the people there. But I don't think we should be changing the rules of voting at all.
Yeah. Again, pending confirmation from Connor, the version of the warrant I'm looking for, looking at from 2019 did not have hours.
So then let's go ahead and do a motion specific to approve the warrant as presented for the town election. And then we have some time but no, I mean, that's no, that doesn't work, because we need to be clear tonight, because we're only 4 weeks from this thing.
Mr. Hare, sorry.
I'm back to, we are not ready for prime time, and I'm back to where's the governor and legislature and trying to keep people safe, move this thing into the fall.
They're not gonna.
If they're not going to do that, I think tonight we approve the warrant and we run the normal hours for the town of Hopkins polls.
Yeah. Through the chair, I stand corrected. The warrant from last year did have the hours. For this purpose, the polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay. So I guess I'll take a motion.
I move that the select board sign the warrant for the town election to be held on June 29th with the hours from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
I second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board?
No, I work both polls, both the early voting and the all day at the polls, and it is grueling. And in the heat, it's going to be very difficult. But if we can get as many people to vote ahead of time or absentee as possible, which is what we really need to do, and make it easier for those who are working the polls, so that during slow times, you could have one person instead of two people at the tables, and give people some bigger breaks. It might work. And I, yeah, I mean, well, it will work. It has to work. And all I can say is it's going to be tough.
It's not like Hopkins has, like I said, we don't have 20,000 people that come to the polls. You know, we generally have 2,000, maybe 3,000 come to the polls. And we've already got how many? I mean, you've already got how many applications, Connor, for
Roughly 600.
All right. So there's 20, 30% of what we generally would expect to get at the polls. So So now we're looking at it 70% at the most, and we're going to get a lot more absentee and mail-in ballots to begin with. So it's not like there's going to be a line down to my Aunt Edna's house on Grove Street, people waiting to get in there and vote, spaced at 6 feet apart. So I think we should just, I guess the motion's on the table. It's seconded. We've had some discussion. The hours are going to be from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. And, I would suggest that your workers work in shifts. So if you can get some more volunteers and train them, and just be ready for it. But I don't foresee, with the way that society is right now, I don't foresee a large influx of people that are going to show up with a homemade mask and risk their life to go and vote for Claire Wright for Cemetery Commission. So I guess I'm going to close the discussion, and I'm going to call for a vote. So I'm going to do a roll call vote here. Mr. Catino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Herr?
Yes.
Mr. Nasrullah?
Nasrullah, yes.
Ms. Lafreniere?
Yes.
Ted Stone's yes. So good. It carries. Is there a second motion? Another motion you have to do, Mr. Catino?
Yeah, I move that the town manager be authorized to initiate requests for the CARES Act reimbursement of relevant expenses from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in accordance with Section 3-1B of the Town of Hopkinton Home Rule Charter.
Yes, I second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Catino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Herr?
Yes.
Mr. Nasrullah?
Yes.
Ms. Lafreniere?
Yes.
Ted Stone, yes. So the town meeting, we're tabling that. So moving on to what are we at? The town annual election warrant. Mr. Kamalo, is that you?
No, we already did that. We just did that one.
We just did that.
All right. So we are at the Hopkins Restaurant outdoor seating. Mr. Kamalu.
Yeah, in your packet, we included the draft Town of Hopkinton temporary outdoor dining rules and regulations. And by way of introduction, the Becker administration's reopening plan came out with specific requirements for restaurants that appear to limit the number of people that can be served, specifically social distancing requirements, as well as the resulting occupancy requirements. And one solution to this in Hopkinton is perhaps for the board to consider approving an outdoor seating and space for restaurants and related establishments. As we all know, space for outdoor seating in the downtown area in Hopkinton is very limited. And therefore, I'm suggesting that the board approve a temporary policy that will allow restaurants to expand either into their private parking lots or into public space, including the sidewalk, parklets, and driveways. And I believe now is the time for the board to act on this policy, because it then would allow restaurants to plan for this before their opening phase kicks in. It also sends a stronger message in terms of the community saying it does support a vibrant downtown. And again, we have circulated this policy for comment. I have not received any adverse comments from our public safety or permitting offices. I met with the Chamber of Commerce board this morning, and they have provided a written comment that with the chair's permission, Elaine Lazarus can read for the board and the public.
It's a letter dated today. It says, Mr. Cavallo, on behalf of the Hopkinton Chamber of Commerce and the Executive Committee, please let this letter serve as our overwhelming endorsement of the proposed temporary outdoor seating rules and regulations. We thank you for the opportunity to be involved in the discussion and believe that particular focus on waiving fees and speed and ease of approvals are critical. If you could please present and articulate our support for the concept to the Select Board at the June 2nd, 2020 meeting, that would be greatly appreciated. The Chamber continues to appreciate the partnership with the town. Collaborations such as this are a great example of the value of that relationship. It is paramount that we encourage and help Hopkinton businesses reopen in these complex times. This program aims to do just that for our town's all-important dining establishments. I would ask that the select board look favorably upon this proposal and what it would mean for so many businesses that have endured tremendous hardship. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Again, this is an opportunity for the board to reimagine the difficult path that the small businesses must take to open and succeed in Hopkinton post the unprecedented COVID-19 times. Elaine and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
So, Mr. Kamalu, if I may, this is going to open, and I'll just use some real-time examples. This would allow Central House to expand onto the sidewalk outside of their deck. This would allow Bill's to use their parking lot in the back. This would allow to use their parking lot up on South Street. This would allow Carboni's to use their parking lot on Cedar Street. Mm-hmm. It's not simply for the downtown. It's any business that has parking or an owned public space. They're able to go ahead, open up their restaurant and bar area, Cornell's as well. Yeah. They're welcome to open up their bar area and restaurant, serve their alcohol, and serve their food in these designated areas, correct?
Correct, including the restaurants that are at the Lambert Street location. They could expand to their landscaped area.
Sure, great. I think that's a great job of kind of thinking outside the box and doing what we can to support our businesses in town. I think that's wonderful. And I, as one member of the board, certainly wholeheartedly support that. I'm going to open it up to the board. Mr. Catino, anything?
Yeah, this is something that Mr. Kamala brought up, and I just think it's a great idea. I've actually got one more that I'd like to discuss right after we make this motion.
Okay, Mr. Herr?
So I fully support this, but I'm wondering what are the downside potential risks that I'm not thinking about sitting here that we'll have to overcome, because I want to overcome them and make this happen. But what are the risks that we're not thinking about, or at least I'm not thinking about?
When we were drafting this, a couple of constraints did come up. One, it has to do with public safety and public access, especially along the sidewalks. Our solution was, well, getting the whole team involved in the review process and getting DPW and the town engineer to confirm that whatever circulation pattern is agreed upon does work. What if somebody says, I just want to walk through where the tables are? We did come up with the idea of roping up the area or simply using cones. Again, we can never control as to whether people are going to comply or not comply. And this is not in regard to what happens on the restaurant side. I'm talking about what could happen when a member of the public is coming down Main Street. That's one. The other issue was that could come up has to do with for example, if we allow bills to access the driveway into town hall, there may be people who are driving into town hall coming in very quickly, not aware of this new arrangement or design. We will have to do a lot of advertising and signage to make sure that we don't have people just driving into the driveway when there are people sitting and enjoying their meals.
We're used to having lots of metal barricades, those steel or aluminum barricades during the marathon week all over downtown. I mean, we could put some of those up to control traffic flow, keep people safe if they have to step into the street to go around tables. You put a barricade out there so the cars are on the other side of that. Okay, I got it. But nothing with the license, nothing with the ABCC, any of that stuff?
No, yeah, nothing with the ABCC. In fact, we received a very pleasant surprise last night where the ABCC actually delegated the licensing process for altering alcohol licenses temporarily to the select board.
Okay, thanks.
That's great. Mr. Nasrullah?
I think it's a great idea. Like Mr. Herr, I'm trying to think of what are the downsides. I haven't come up with any. But so obviously we're going to have fewer customers in all these restaurants that are opening because now we're using the parking lot. I'm correct in that? Are we going to, as part of this, limit the number of customers that the restaurant can be serving at a particular time?
Well, I think just by the fact that you have to be 6 feet apart will generally limit the amount.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mr. Caballo, are we at, like Home Depot is at, I don't know, they're at 100 in their store, or X amount of percentage of their occupancy. Are we at that right now? Or are we looking at percentage numbers or physical numbers or strictly the social distancing precautions?
Yeah, I think it's both for restaurants. There's social distancing as well as the occupancy limit to 25%.
25%. Okay.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Good?
Yep.
Good. Mary Jo?
I love this idea, and we're going to look a lot more European with little tables on the sidewalks and the areas roped off. But other places, there are some places that have been doing it now for a number of years, and I think that at least temporarily we can manage this well and help our businesses.
I agree. With the caveat on this whole thing that public safety is paramount. So if it winds up working out that it doesn't work out, then I think the Board of Selectmen has the option to shut that down, correct? Or I'm sorry, the Select Board has the option to shut that down, correct, Norman?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Good.
Question.
So, go ahead.
For the board is, I'm recommending that the temporary policy be in place until 45 days at the end of the state of emergency.
Yeah, so I just got a text from an intent listener asking, so let's say the Bill's Pizza, they have a one-way in, one-way out. Would we turn that into two-way, like, in and out traffic, one-way? So like say the sidewalk over by the Masonic Hall, which long before I think anybody on this call has been in town, that used to be two-way traffic to go in and out. Will Bills at that point turn, like make that hall, that road between Bills and Town Hall as do not enter, do not exit?
Yeah, that is the idea. And in fact, I should mention, I remember at the beginning phases of the Main Street Corridor project, having these lengthy discussions. And in fact, Dave sent me plans that did show the driveway between Town Hall and Bill's designed as an arcade, meaning therefore that the driveway on the Masonic side and the bank became a two-way driveway instead of a one-way driveway.
Okay.
So that's the idea.
I'm a little distracted. I'm above my screen. I'm watching all those peaceful protests in Boston that are no longer peaceful. So, what a surprise. So, all right. So, what do we need, Norm? Do you need a motion? Mr. Catino, you had something else, but are we going to?
Yeah, it's a little bit different. It involves a set aside money. So let's move this one. Just give me 2 minutes and I'll explain it really quickly.
All right. So I request a motion to adopt the temporary outdoor dining rules and regulations as revised.
So moved.
Second.
I just mentioned that one of those revisions is removing a reference to the ABCC given the guidance we just received. So it's in item 3 in the first section.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we have a motion and it's seconded.
And accepted change.
What?
And I accept the change, the addition of the
Okay. And how
ABC.
about the second? Just whoever seconded it is
Second,
that?
we'll
Okay.
second that again.
You accept the change, okay. No further discussion? All in favor? I'm sorry, roll call vote. Mr. Catino?
Yes.
Mr. Herr?
Yes.
Mr. Nasrullah?
Yes.
Leave that on.
Me.
Ms. Lafreniere?
Yes,
And Mr. Tedstone, yes. So, all right, so that carries. Mr. Catino, go ahead.
Yeah.
Make it
Through the chair, I promise just 2 minutes. What I'm talking about is that like a select board stimulus for Hopkinton businesses. What I'd like to do is see if there's any way to set aside about $10,000. And during the months of July and August, if a resident shops at Hopkins small businesses like at least 4 times a week and spends at least $150, and they bring in the slips and fill out a form, the town will give the resident like a $25, let's just call it a hop card. And it's accepted only at those same businesses involved in the experience. So it's just to incentivize people to shop downtown, eat anywhere, well, eat any of the businesses we were just talking about, Carboni's, any of these businesses. And, if the people, so we give them a $25 card, so this will generate about a minimum of like 1,600 shop visits with sales. It'll generate about $60,000 in revenue for town businesses, and that's assuming 400 gift cards. And but the gift cards are only redeemable at the same businesses, and those should generate about an additional $10,000 in revenue. And then the town will get tax money back on that also. So this is just something, I can hash it out later on, but this was just something I was just trying to look for kind of a stimulus that for July and August are usually slow, and this is finally when we're going to thaw out from the COVID stuff, but just something to push all of our town businesses so that people don't go to Ashland, don't go to Holliston, don't go to anywhere else. They keep their money in town. But I can draft out the details and send them out to everybody. But I just thought this would be a fun thing to stimulate the business in town and create something enjoyable.
I think that's probably something you need to get with Mr. Kamalu and figure out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're prepared to put $10,000.
No. Just since we were talking about that, I figured this was a great time to talk.
Yep. Get with Mr. Kamalu, figure it out. All right. So moving on, town manager report, Mr. Kamalu.
Yes. Part of my request was for the board to allow to authorize the town manager to work with the town engineer, DPW director, and assistant town manager to see if the board will approve closing the town hall driveway. This will require us to have some conversations with all the tenants alongside Bill's Pizza, the Masons, as well as the bank.
Okay. You need a motion from me?
Please.
I move to allow Mr. Kamalu to work jointly with the assistant town manager, John Westerling, and the affected businesses to negotiate the one-way closure of one of the driveways.
So moved.
Second.
Yes, and the motion will reflect that the closure will be temporary, and we'll also have Dave Del Toro as part of that team.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yep, thank you. So
What
we have a motion.
reason for this, Mr. Kamal? Is this all part of the outdoor restaurant thing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I need a second.
I second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'm sorry, Mr. Catino, how do you vote?
Catino, yes.
One second, I have a question. I don't understand why this is necessary. I mean, what are they going to use the whole parking lot for a restaurant? I mean, I don't understand why people can't drive in, either park or around the back and drive out around. Why does it have to be two-way? Where are they going to park?
It's not going to be two-way. It's going to be one-way.
One driveway is going to be two-way, right?
Right, but there's only going to be one way in and out. Because what if they want to put tables there?
How many, I mean, where are they going to put tables? I mean, it's a huge parking lot unless they're going to put a parking lot. I don't understand. People are still going to be driving in and driving out. Why can't they drive in and around the back and out? I don't understand why we have to because it's not too wide to make it in and out.
Yeah.
We'll end up with people having problems. I don't see why it's necessary.
Yeah, if I may,
Yeah.
in terms of the width of the driveway, Masonic Lodge side, we looked into this before. It is doable. It can be a two-way driveway. Second point was simply making this an opportunity. We are not determining, we have not even received confirmation from bills that they will like to do so. We're simply being proactive that in the event that they require additional space for outdoor seating, can the driveway be available? So in other words, we simply want to present them with an opportunity. The whole idea is to be proactive and give the opportunities to businesses to make up for what they've lost in the last 3 months.
Yeah. All right. So we got a motion and seconded. We've had some discussion, so we'll vote on it. Mr. Catino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Herr?
Or yes.
Mr. Nasrullah?
Nasrullah, yes.
Ms. Lafreniere?
I think I'm going to abstain because I don't understand the necessity for making that a two-way driveway.
You're going to abstain or you're going to say no?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. And I'm going to say yes. So it's 4-0 to 1. So it looks like you're good there, Mr. Kamalo. Go ahead. Next item.
Yeah, next item is the Main Street Corridor update. As you may have received notice from the town manager, the town received the right-of-way certificate from Mass DOT. The notice of taking access agreements have been mailed to all the affected properties. We are finalizing our undergrounding designs. In fact, I believe the utility Eversource has scheduled a sidewalk later this week. We're also finalizing our discussions with the BAA regarding what happens around the marathon start line. And advertising for the project is anticipated end of June, beginning of July.
Mr. Kamalo, when you say advertising, you mean putting it out to bid, correct?
Correct.
Good. That's excellent news, Mr. Kamalo. Need something from us on that? No. What else you got, Mr. Kamalo?
I'm all set.
Okay, liaison reports. Mr. Catino.
None.
Okay, Mr. Herr.
None.
Mr. Nasrullah.
None.
Ms. Lafreniere.
Yeah, I have I have one from the Tax Relief Committee. I spoke with John Palmer, and he said that they were able to give 26 people $650 this year to help them out with their taxes. But they are very concerned. They got money for Laborers Training Center for next year, and I want to thank Laborers Training Center for that. But they're concerned about their marathon runner because they do get quite a bit of money from that. And I hope to do this 26.2 race so and still continue to raise the money for the tax relief. The other thing that I wanted was the dog pound has been done when Jane Moran came in and wanted the money for the historical preservation to do the dog pound, the old dog pound, and it looks good. It's got a sign out there and they did a very nice job. Suggest people take a look at it. I think the other thing I wanted to say was the senior high school parade was fabulous. The kids, the cars were all decorated, and I was out front of the town hall, and I have balloons and all kinds of things out there too. And it was such a nice thing to do for them. And then I also wanted to thank Phil Powers because there was a demonstration here in town on Sunday, and there were a little over 200 people there. And Officer Powers was wonderful, put the cruiser in a place so that people could stand at distances. Everybody was masked pretty much, and everybody kept to their distance. And he cordoned off Marathon Way with the cruiser so that people could use that to spread out. And it was very peaceful. And I just wanted to thank him and thank the people that were there for the courtesy that they extended to each other, unlike some of the other places that's going on in this country. Hopkinton is a great example. And all I have.
Okay. And I have nothing. So, future board agenda items. Mr. Catino.
Parking,
I'm sorry.
parking.
Okay, Mr. Herr. Mr. Nasrullah.
Just the same thing I brought up last time, the gunshots at night,
Okay.
limiting hours of shooting out in residential areas.
Ms. Lafreniere.
Yeah, I again, you brought up the redoing of Cedar Street after they put the water main in, and it hasn't been done. And I have now received a few complaints from people living there that they haven't finished the project. And I was wondering when we were going to find out from the DPW what the timeline is on that.
Yeah, I don't think that's a DPW. I think Mr. Kamala was saying that that's well, I guess it is the DPW. I guess it's a matter of getting
Cedar Street.
getting the insurance and applying the insurance and putting it out to bid and having it get done. So, Mr. Kamala, was there any headway done on that?
Yeah, quick update. Unfortunately, the negotiations with the contractor who's stepping in have run into a snag, and he's now pointing out that he was not made aware of a condition that has been put in place, and the lawyers are back in negotiating the new contract. So whilst we had expected the work to commence immediately, there are now further delays until further notice.
Can you expand on that for me, please? Who wasn't aware of a clause? Can you explain that?
Yeah, the contractor who had been identified to step in to perform the work and complete the project.
Okay.
Yes, is the one who's coming back and saying he was not notified of a condition that is in the contract.
Okay, so do we have a time frame on this? Because being somebody who drives on that twice a day, only actually once a day on the bad part, it's getting pretty old.
Yes, we're really pushing hard. We've asked Jenny to really bring this across the finish line. I don't have a timeline right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the contractor is saying he was not aware of a clause in the contract that he signed?
That he had to finish the project.
No, that he was, yeah, he has not yet signed the contract. He was getting ready to sign the contract and then he read this.
The guy fixed it. Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay.
All right, I'll talk to you offline about that, Norman.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. So, Mr. Catino, favorite time of the night?
Mr. Chair, one quick point.
Go ahead.
Who facilitates these Zoom meetings? Like, is it you that's like the lead Zoom person, or is there somebody else that's?
I believe it's Josh.
Is it okay? I'll follow up with Josh. There's some funky stuff going on that we need to stop. I think.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman,
Yes,
to adjourn.
I'm not opposed to that. I'd love a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Catino, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Mr. Herr?
Or yes.
Mr. Nasrullah?
No.
Okay, Ms. Lafreniere?
Yes.
And I'll abstain. So it carries 3-1 to 1. So, all right. Thank you. See you next time.
See you guys.
Stay safe, everybody stay safe, please.
Everyone stay safe.
God bless.